I thought the worst year of my life was finally over until I saw the for sale sign planted in the lawn of the only thing my father left me. My stepfather called it a necessary sacrifice to fund a wedding my stepsister could not afford. He smiled when he told me it was already under contract, convinced I was powerless. But he forgot that houses have paper trails. And unlike my family, paper trails do not lie. The notification arrived at 2 a.m, the kind of digital chirp that usually signals a spam email or a forgotten subscription renewal. I was awake, staring at the ceiling of my rental apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator that I did not own. At 33, I was supposed to have more than this. I was supposed to have a career that had not imploded 3 months ago during a corporate restructuring. And I was supposed to have a partner who had not decided that our 5-year relationship was merely a placeholder for something better. I rolled over and squinted at the blue light of my phone. Subject: Confirmation of policy update. 4-2-2. Dune Road. My stomach turned over. Dune Road was not my apartment. It was the beach house, my father's house, for the last 3 years, since the cancer took him in a rapid, terrifying sweep that left me breathless. The house had been the only thing that felt solid. It was a small, weathered A-frame on the edge of a mid-sized coastal town 2 hours south of here. It smelled of cedar and salt, and the specific brand of pipe tobacco my father smoked only on Sundays, even though I did not live there. Knowing it existed was the tether that kept me from floating away entirely. I opened the email. Dear policyholder, thank you for updating the mailing address on your homeowner's insurance. All future notices will be sent to the address on file. I sat up, the sheets pooling around my waist. I had not updated anything. My fingers trembled as I tapped the customer service number listed at the bottom. I expected a recording, but after 10 minutes of holding, a tired voice answered. I explained the situation, trying to keep the panic out of my throat. The agent typed loudly on the other end. That change was processed yesterday. Ma'am, the agent said, by the primary account holder. I am the primary account holder. I said, that is my house. I did not make that change. There was a pause. The request came through the online portal. The new mailing address is listed as 1210 Maple Avenue. The air left my lungs. Maple Avenue, that was my mother's house, the house where she lived with Greg. He was my stepfather, a man who wore expensive loafers and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He had married my mother 5 years ago, 2 years before my father died. He was a man of big ideas and small follow-through, always chasing a deal, always leveraging one asset to float another. My father had never liked him. He had been polite, because my father was a gentleman. But he had told me once that Greg was the kind of man who looked at a sunset and calculated how much he could charge for the view. I thanked the agent and hung up. I stared at the phone. Why would Greg or my mother divert the insurance mail? They were managing the rental for me temporarily while I got my feet back under me after the layoff. A favor I had accepted with reluctance. They handled the tenant checks. I paid the mortgage and the taxes. It was a simple arrangement. I dialed my mother. It was early, but I did not care. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. Natalie? Is everything okay? It is not even 6 o'clock. I got an email about the beach house. I said, I skipped the pleasantries. Why did the insurance notices get moved to your address? There was a silence on the line, but it was not the silence of confusion. It was the heavy, loaded silence of someone quickly arranging their defenses. Oh, that, she said, her tone shifting into that breezy, dismissive register she used when she wanted to end a conversation. Greg probably just consolidated the paperwork. It is easier if everything comes to us since we are handling the tenants. Natalie, you know how overwhelmed you have been lately. We are just trying to help. I gripped the phone tighter. I am not overwhelmed. Mom, I am unemployed, not incompetent, and you should have asked me. That is my house, Natalie. Please, she sighed. Do not start drama again. You are always looking for a fight lately. We are doing you a favor. There was something in her voice, a tremor she was trying to hide with annoyance. My mother had always been a terrible liar. She was a woman who needed peace at any cost, usually at my expense. "Mom," I said, lowering my voice. "What is going on?" I heard Greg in the background, a muffled mumble. Then my mother sighed again, a long, ragged sound. "We were going to tell you this weekend," she said. "We wanted to do it in person." "Tell me what?" "We have an offer, Natalie. A cash offer, and we are going to take it. The world stops spinning." "Take what?" I asked. Though I already knew. "The house," she said. "We are selling the beach house. You cannot sell the beach house," I said. My voice sounded strange, detached, as if I were speaking from underwater. "It is not yours to sell. Dad left it to me. Technically, it became family property when I remarried," she said, reciting a line that sounded rehearsed. "And we need the money. Natalie, Bella's wedding is in 3 months. You know how important this is to her. It is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Bella was my stepsister, Greg's daughter. She was 24, loud, and treated the world like a vending machine that occasionally malfunctioned if it did not give her exactly what she wanted." "You are selling my father's house to pay for a party?" I asked. "It is not just a party," my mother snapped. "It is her future, and we have other expenses, family expenses. Greg has been carrying a lot of weight, and this asset is just sitting there, barely breaking even. It is selfish to hoard it when the family is drowning." Asset. She called it an asset. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I did not scream. I simply pressed the red button and ended the call because if I had stayed on the line for 1 second longer, I would have said things that can never be retracted. I was in my car 20 minutes later. The drive to the coast usually calmed me. It was a transition from the gray concrete of the city to the open, wild greens and blues of the shore. But today, the highway felt like a tunnel closing in. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Selfish. That was the word she had used. My father had bought that house 30 years ago. He had taught me to swim in the ocean out front. He had sat on the back deck with me the night my first boyfriend broke my heart and told me that the ocean was the only thing that was allowed to make me feel small. The house is your safety net. Natalie. He had told me a week before he died. No matter what happens, you keep the house. It is the one thing they cannot take from you. I pulled onto Dune Road just as the sun was breaking through the marine layer. The street was quiet, lined with cottages that had mostly been replaced by towering modern rental properties. But my father's house was still there, low and humble, with its cedar shakes turned silver by the salt air. And there, stuck in the front lawn like a dagger, was the sign, "For sale," and across the top, a red rider that stopped my heart. Under contract. I parked the car and got out. My legs felt heavy. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. I reached for the spare key hidden under the loose brick on the porch planter, but the brick was gone. In its place was a shiny new digital lockbox hanging from the doorknob. I walked around the back. The curtains were drawn, but I peered through a gap in the sliding glass door. The inside was unrecognizable. My father's worn leather armchair was gone. The bookshelf he had built by hand, filled with his collection of maritime history and paperback thrillers, was empty. In fact, the bookshelf itself was gone. The walls, which had been a warm, sandy yellow, were painted a sterile, bright white. The room was filled with furniture I had never seen before. Generic, beige, inoffensive furniture. It looked like a hotel lobby. It looked like a place where no one lived. They had staged it. They had erased him. I heard a car pull into the driveway behind me. I turned around to see Greg's silver sedan. He got out, wearing a polo shirt and sunglasses, looking for all the world like a man arriving to inspect his kingdom. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. "Natalie," he said, walking up the path, "your mother said you were coming. I told her to give you space. But you always have to rush into things, don't you?" "Where is my father's chair?" I asked. Greg sighed, taking off his sunglasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It is in storage. Natalie, along with the rest of the junk, we had to declutter. You cannot show a house when it looks like a mausoleum. You do not have the right to sell this. I said. I stepped toward him. This house is mine. Greg laughed. A short, sharp bark of a sound. He shook his head, looking at me with a pitying expression that made my skin crawl. Natalie, honey, you need to wake up. Your mother and I have been paying the bills on this place for 6 months while you figured your life out. We are on the deed. We have the paperwork. This is a family decision. He gestured to the house, sweeping his hand through the air. Do you have any idea what the market is doing right now? We got an offer 20% over asking, cash. Close in 2 weeks. This is going to set Bella up for life. It is going to clear our debts. You are part of this family. Natalie, act like it. Be happy for your sister. He kept saying our debts, our house. I looked at him. I want to see the contract. I said. Greg checked his watch. I do not have it on me. It is with the title company. Then send me a copy. I said, if you have the right to sell it, prove it. Send me the purchase agreement. He looked at me for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Fine, he said. I will email it to you. But Natalie, if you sabotage this, if you scare off this buyer with your hysterics, you are not just hurting me. You are hurting your mother. Do you want to be the reason she has a heart attack? Do you want to be the reason Bella has to cancel her wedding? He stepped closer, invading my space. Grow up, he said softly. Your dad is gone. He is not coming back. This is just wood and concrete. Let it go. He turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing around the curve. I stood there for a long time. The ocean roared behind me, a constant, rhythmic thumping. I took out my phone and opened Instagram. I didn't follow Bella. I had muted her years ago, but I searched for her handle. There it was, a reel posted 3 hours ago. It was a montage of photos. Bella trying on a dress that looked like it cost more than my car, Bella holding a glass of champagne, and then a photo of a venue. I recognized it as the Grand View, a cliffside resort where weddings started at $50,000 just for the rental fee. The caption read, New Beginnings. So blessed that my dreams are finally coming true. Wedding countdown. Grateful manifested it. She hadn't manifested anything. She was cannibalizing my inheritance. If the wedding was in 3 months, and they were booking the Grand View now, the money was already moving. Greg wasn't waiting for the closing to spend the proceeds. He was spending against the promise of the sale. I turned away from the house and walked down the street. I needed to breathe. Natalie? I stopped. Standing on the porch of the cottage next door was Mrs. Gable. She had lived there since before I was born. She was a tiny woman with skin like crumpled parchment and eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Gable, I said, forcing a smile. She beckoned me over. I walked up her steps. I saw the sign, she said, keeping her voice low. I was surprised. Your father always said he wanted you to keep the place. I know, I said. I didn't know how to explain it. She looked around, checking the street, then leaned in closer. A man was here, she said. What? About 3 weeks ago. A man in a suit. He didn't look like a real estate agent. He looked official. He knocked on your door, and when no one answered, he came over here. What did he want? I asked. He asked who was living there. Mrs. Gable said. He asked if I knew the owners, and then he asked a strange question. What? He asked if Natalie Parker was still alive. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. He asked if I was alive? Mrs. Gable nodded. I told him of course you were. I told him I saw you just last month when you came to check the gutters. He wrote it down in a notebook and left. He didn't leave a card. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. I said. My voice was trembling again. She squeezed my hand. Her hand was dry and warm. Something is not right. Natalie, she whispered, your stepfather. He has been here a lot lately. Even when the tenants aren't here, he brings people, not renters, men with clipboards. I walked back to my car with Mrs. Gable's warning ringing in my ears. Is Natalie Parker still alive? Why would someone ask that? Unless someone had told them I wasn't. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone again. I texted Greg. Send me the contract. Now. He didn't reply for 10 minutes. Then, a message came through. It wasn't a PDF. It was a screenshot. It was blurry, taken hastily with a phone camera. It showed the first page of a standard residential purchase agreement. The price was blacked out. The buyer's name was partially obscured. An LLC based in Nevada. I zoomed in on the bottom of the page. Seller, Natalie Parker. By Gregory Hines. Attorney-in-fact. My blood ran cold. Attorney-in-fact meant power of attorney. It meant he was claiming legal authority to sign for me. I scrolled to the next screenshot he sent. It was the signature page. There, on the line for authorized signer, was a scrawl of ink. It looped and curved. It looked like my signature. It looked exactly like the way I signed my name on birthday cards and checks. But I had not signed it. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. How did he get a power of attorney? I had never given him one. I had never signed anything giving him control over my finances or my property. And then, the memory hit me. It was small. A fragment of the past year that I had dismissed as bad luck. The missing mail, 6 months ago. I had missed a jury summons. I only found out when the court sent a warning letter, to my mother's address. She had handed it to me weeks later, claiming it must have gotten mixed up in her pile. Then there was the bank letter, a notification about a credit inquiry I didn't recognize. I had assumed I lost it. I had assumed I was just disorganized, scattering in the wind after the layoff. But it hadn't been me. The birthday cards from my aunt in Ohio that never arrived. The renewed debit card that I had to reorder because the first one got lost in the mail. They hadn't been lost. They had been intercepted. If Greg had access to my mail, he had access to my identity. He could have forged a power of attorney document, mailed it to himself, and intercepted any confirmation letters sent to me. He wasn't just bullying me, he was impersonating me. I looked back at the house. The under contract sign seemed to mock me. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the broken, unemployed daughter who would cry for a few days and then accept the generosity of a small payout from the sale while they toasted with champagne at Bella's wedding. Greg had told me to act like family. I looked at the signature on the screen, the forgery of my own name. He was right. I needed to act like family. Just not his family. I needed to act like my father's daughter. I put the car in gear. I didn't drive back to the city. I drove to the nearest coffee shop with Wi-Fi. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began to search. Real estate attorneys near me. How to stop a fraudulent sale. Report notary fraud. I found a name. Sarah Jenkins, an estate litigator with a chaotic website but 5-star reviews for being a pit bull. I dialed the number. Law office. A receptionist answered. I need an emergency consultation. I said. My voice was steady now. The trembling was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My stepfather is selling a house that belongs to me using a forged signature. Closing is in 2 weeks. There was a pause. And then the tone on the other end sharpened. Can you come in today at 4? I will be there. I said. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the ocean. Gray and churning. They wanted a fight. They wanted to rewrite history. They wanted to take the last piece of my father and turn it into a catering deposit. I opened the screenshot of the contract again. I saved it. Then I backed it up to the cloud. I was done being polite. I was done being the dutiful daughter. I pulled up my banking app and saw the pathetic balance. The result of months of unemployment. It didn't matter. I would max out every credit card I had to pay this lawyer. I would burn my credit score to the ground if I had to. Because Greg was right about one thing. This wasn't just wood and concrete. It was the truth. And I was going to make sure the truth buried them. I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and walked out the door. The wind had picked up, biting and cold. But I didn't zip up my jacket. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to remember exactly how cold it was the day I decided to go to war. The office of Sarah Jenkins smelled like old coffee and lemon furniture polish. It was not a high-rise suite with ocean views. It was tucked into the back of a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a failing travel agency. Sarah herself was sharp-edged and efficient. A woman in her late 50s with gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She did not offer me water. She did not offer me sympathy. She pointed to the chair opposite her desk and opened a yellow legal pad. "Tell me what you know," she said. "Not what you feel, what you know." I took a breath, trying to steady my hands. "My stepfather is selling my father's beach house," I said. "He claims he has the right. He claims he has a power of attorney." Sarah wrote something down. "Who is on the title?" she asked. I blinked. "My father was—" I said. "Is he still?" she asked. "Or is it you? Or is it your mother? Or is it a trust?" I opened my mouth and closed it. The shame hit me like a physical blow. I had been so wrapped up in grief, then in just surviving the last few years, that I had never actually looked at the deed. I had trusted my mother when she said they were handling the probate. I had trusted her when she said the house was safe. "I do not know," I admitted. Sarah stopped writing and looked at me over her glasses. "That is the first thing we fix," she said. "You cannot fight for something if you do not know who owns it. Who has been collecting the rent?" "My mother and stepfather." I said. "They manage it. They send me the net proceeds after expenses, or they used to." "Did you ever sign a management agreement?" "No." "Did you ever see the lease agreements with the tenants?" "No." She sighed, a short burst of air through her nose. "Natalie, you have been asleep at the wheel," she said. "It happens. Grief does that to people. But you need to wake up now. If there is a closing scheduled, we are on a clock. You need the deed. You need to know exactly how that property is vested. If it is in a trust, the trust document rules. If it is in your name, they are forging your signature. If it is in your mother's name, you might be out of luck unless you can prove undue influence." I left her office with a list of instructions that felt less like legal advice and more like a scavenger hunt. My first stop was the county records office. It was a sterile building with fluorescent lights that hummed aggressively. I waited in line for 40 minutes, clutching my driver's license, until a bored clerk called my number. "I need a copy of the recorded deed for 422 Dune Road," I said. The clerk typed slowly. The printer whirred. She slid a document across the counter. "That will be $4, she said. I paid her and took the paper to a bench in the hallway. My eyes scanned the legalese, skipping over the descriptions of meets and bounds until I found the section labeled Grantee. There it was. Robert Parker, trustee of the Parker Shoreline Trust, dated August 15th, 2015. I froze. The Parker Shoreline Trust. I had never heard of it. My father had never mentioned a trust by that specific name. He had talked about a will. He had talked about wanting me to be safe. But a trust? A trust meant specific rules. A trust meant there was a document somewhere that dictated exactly what happened to the house. Regardless of what my mother or Greg wanted, I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight. "Natalie, I cannot talk right now. We are meeting with the florist. There is a trust." I said. The line went dead silent. "What?" she whispered. "I am looking at the deed. Mom, it says the house belongs to the Parker Shoreline Trust. You told me it was just in probate. You told me it was simple." "It is simple," she stammered. Her voice pitched up, a sure sign she was cornered. "That was just something your father set up for tax reasons years ago." "It does not mean anything. It means everything." I said. "Who is the trustee?" "Mom? Is it you?" "I do not know the details." "Natalie!" she snapped. "Greg handles the paperwork. Why are you digging into this? You are going to ruin everything. Is there a trust document?" I pressed. "No!" she shouted. Then she stopped. "There is no trust. It was dissolved. Or, look, your dad changed things at the end. He was confused. He moved things around. The air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. He changed things at the end. That was an admission. She knew about it. She knew there was a structure. And she was trying to pretend it didn't exist." I hung up before she could spin another lie. I sat there for a moment, staring at the words Parker Shoreline Trust. If the house was in a trust, then Greg couldn't sell it unless he was the trustee. And my father, who tolerated Greg like one tolerates a mild rash, would never have named him trustee. I needed to know who was managing the property legally. I found the number for the property management company, a local firm called Coastal Keepers, searching through old emails from 2 years ago when I had briefly been CC'd on a repair invoice. I dialed the number. Coastal Keepers. This is Brenda. Hi, Brenda. This is Natalie Parker. I am calling about the property at 422 Dune Road. Oh, hello, Ms. Parker, Brenda said. Her voice was cheerful, professional. We haven't heard from you in a while. I need to request a copy of the current management agreement, I said, and the tenant ledger for the last year. There was a pause. The typing sound in the background stopped. I am sorry, Miss Parker, but I cannot release that information to you. Why not? I asked. I am the owner. Well, actually, our records show that Mr. Hines is the primary contact and authorized party, Brenda said. He updated the file about 8 months ago. Updated it how? He provided documentation authorizing him to act on behalf of the ownership entity. She said, he removed you from the active access list. He said you were stepping back for health reasons. My grip on the phone tightened until my fingers hurt. Health reasons? I repeated. That is what the note says, Brenda said, sounding uncomfortable. Look, if you want access, you will need to get Mr. Hines to reauthorize you. We have strict privacy rules. He is selling the house. Brenda, without my permission, I cannot get involved in a domestic dispute. Ma'am, she said, her voice turning cold. Please contact Mr. Hines. She hung up. I sat on the bench in the county records office and felt a scream building in my chest. They had systematically walled me off. They had used the last year, my year of depression, of job loss, of vulnerability, to surgically remove me from my own life. I drove back to Sarah Jenkins' office. I didn't have an appointment, but I walked in and slapped the deed on her desk. There is a trust, I said, and the property manager says my stepfather used documentation to remove me from the account. Sarah looked at the deed. She looked at me. Okay, she said. Now we have something. She pulled a fresh sheet of paper from her printer tray. We are going to send a demand letter, she said, to the escrow company, to the real estate agent, and to your stepfather. We are going to put them on notice that the title is in dispute. What will that do? I asked. It throws a wrench in the gears, she said, typing furiously. Title companies are allergic to risk. If they sniff a lawsuit, they will pause the closing. But Natalie, you need to be ready. When we send this, we are declaring war. There is no going back to Sunday dinners after this. I thought about the empty spot where my father's chair used to be. I thought about the for sale sign. Send it, I said. I was back in my apartment 3 hours later when the fallout began. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was Greg. I stared at the notification for a long time before I pressed play. I put it on speaker so I wouldn't have to hold the phone against my ear. Natalie. His voice was low, shaking with a suppressed rage that was far scarier than shouting. I just got a letter from some ambulance chaser lawyer. Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea what you have done? We are 2 weeks away from closing. This family is counting on this money. Bella is counting on this money. And you? You are so selfish. You are unstable. Natalie, we have all seen it. You lost your job. You lost your boyfriend. And now you want to burn down everyone else's happiness because you are miserable. He took a breath. I could hear him pacing. Withdraw the letter. Call the lawyer and tell her it was a mistake. If you do not, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Do not test me on this. The message ended. I sat on my couch, hugging my knees, unstable. That was the narrative they were building. If I fought back, I was crazy. If I asked questions, I was starting drama. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Bella. Mom is crying. I hope you are happy. We are having a family dinner tonight at my place to talk about this like adults. Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike are coming. You need to be there. 7 p.m. Don't be late. A peace dinner. It sounded like a trap. It felt like a trap. But if I didn't go, they would spin my absence as proof of my instability. See? She won't even talk to us. She is irrational. I put on my best blazer. I put on waterproof mascara. I drove to Bella's apartment in the trendy part of town, an apartment I knew Greg paid the rent for, when I walked in. The air was thick with the smell of roasted chicken and judgment. My mother was sitting on the sofa, clutching a tissue, looking pale and fragile. Greg stood by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, staring out at the street. Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike, my mother's sister and her husband, were seated at the dining table, looking solemn. Natalie, Aunt Linda said, standing up to hug me. The hug was stiff, performative. We are just so worried about you. I am fine. Linda, I said, stepping back. Sit down, Greg said. He didn't turn around. I sat at the end of the table. Bella came out of the kitchen, slamming a bowl of salad onto the table. She didn't look at me. We just want to understand, Uncle Mike said, clasping his hands. Why are you doing this? Natalie, this sale. It is good for everyone. It is a windfall. It is not a windfall, I said. It is my father's house. It is a house, Greg said, finally turning to face me. It is a depreciating asset that requires maintenance, and right now, it is the only way to clear the decks for this family, the only way to pay for a wedding you cannot afford. I said, that is not fair, Bella shouted. She pointed a salad tong at me. This is not just about the wedding. It is about helping Mom and Dad. They have supported you for years. Natalie, supported me? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I have been paying my own bills since I was 22. Really? Greg said. He walked over to the table and leaned down, placing his hands on the wood. What about when you lost your job 3 months ago? Who paid for your car insurance? I paid it, I said. Greg shook his head. And the credit card debt? He asked softly. The $6,000 you racked up on therapy and takeout? We know about that. Natalie, we know you are drowning. We are trying to throw you a life raft. We pay off your debts from the sale. We pay for the wedding. We secure your mother's retirement. Everyone wins. I looked at my mother. She looked away. I had told her about the credit card debt in a moment of weakness. Late one night when I was feeling particularly low, it was a private confidence, a shameful secret I had shared with my mother because I needed reassurance, and she had given it to him to use as ammunition. You told him, I said to her. She wiped her eyes. We do not keep secrets. Natalie, we are partners. This is an intervention, Aunt Linda said softly. We love you, honey, but you are not thinking clearly. You are lashing out because you are hurting. But you cannot hold the family hostage over a building. They had scripts. They had rehearsed this. The concern, the pity, the financial shaming. It was a coordinated assault on my reality. I took a sip of water. I forced my heartbeat to slow down. I have a question, I said. They all looked at me, expecting a surrender. If you have the legal authority to sell the house, I said, looking directly at Greg. If everything is above board and I am just being crazy, why did you keep it a secret? The room went silent. Why did you divert the mail? I continued. Why did you change the locks? Why did you wait until the house was under contract to tell me? If it is such a great thing for the family, why did you have to hide it? Greg's face turned a mottled shade of red. The vein in his temple throbbed. We didn't tell you because we knew you would react like this, he shouted. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Because you are irrational. You are never good with money. Natalie, you would have lost that house anyway within 5 years. You would have let it rot or lost it to the bank because you cannot hold down a job. The mask had slipped. The cool, calculated businessman was gone, replaced by a desperate, angry bully. Greg, Uncle Mike said, reaching out a hand. No, Greg yelled. I am done tiptoeing around her. She is ungrateful. I have stepped up to be a father to you. Natalie, when your own dad left you a mess of a property with no instructions, he didn't leave a mess, I said quietly. He left a trust. Greg froze. His eyes flicked to my mother. "There is no trust," he spat. "That is a fantasy." "Then why does the deed say there is?" I asked. "Get out," Greg said. I stood up. "I said get out," he screamed. I walked to the door. My mother was sobbing into her hands. Bella was glaring at me with pure hatred. I opened the door and turned back one last time. "I am not signing anything," I said, "and if you try to forge my name again, I will put you in jail." I walked out into the cool night air. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I didn't go home. I drove to my mother's house, the house on Maple Avenue. I knew they were all at Bella's. I still had my key. I let myself in. The house was quiet. I went straight to the hall closet where my mother kept the family photo albums. I wanted to find the letters my father had written to me when I was in college. Letters I had stored in a blue shoebox on the top shelf for safekeeping when I moved apartments last year. I opened the closet door. The shelf was empty. I checked the other shelves. I checked the guest room. I checked the garage. The blue shoebox was gone. The photo albums from my childhood, the ones of just me and my dad, before Greg, were gone. I stood in the center of the garage, surrounded by Greg's golf clubs and boxes of wedding decorations. They hadn't just taken the house. They were curating the past. They were removing the evidence that we had ever been a happy family before Greg arrived. They were erasing my father's legacy to make room for their own. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control. I drove home, feeling a cold resolve settling in my bones. The next morning, I did what Sarah Jenkins had told me to do. I ran a full credit report. I paid the $20 for the premium version that showed every inquiry, every soft pull. I scanned the list. There were the usuals: my student loan servicer, my credit card company. And then, 3 months ago, Red River Lending Services. I didn't know them. I had never applied for a loan with them. I Googled the name. It wasn't a bank. It was a hard money lender, the kind of place that charged 12% interest and didn't ask too many questions about income as long as there was collateral. I scrolled down. 1 month ago, Red River Lending Services, and then a recorded document number linked to the inquiry. I clicked the link. It took me to a public records database. Durable power of attorney. Principal: Natalie Parker. Agent: Gregory Hines. I downloaded the PDF. It opened on my screen. It was dated 6 months ago. The signature looked like mine, but the loop on the P was wrong. My father had taught me to sign with a sharp, vertical line. This one was round and soft. I scrolled to the bottom. Subscribed and sworn to before me this 10th day of July, 2025. Jennifer Stevens, Notary Public. There was a stamp. A commission number. I stared at the name. Jennifer Stevens. On July 10th. I had been in a job interview in the city. I remembered it perfectly because I had spilled coffee on my blouse right before walking in. I had not been signing legal documents with a notary I had never met. I called Sarah Jenkins. I found the POA. I said, "It is forged," and they used it to get a loan from a hard money lender called Red River. "Send it to me," Sarah said. I emailed it. A minute later, she called me back. "This is serious. Natalie, this is a felony. So we can stop the sale?" I asked. "It is not that simple," she said. Her voice was grave. "The document looks real. The notary stamp is real. To a third party, like the escrow officer or the lender, this looks valid. We have to prove it is a forgery. That requires a handwriting expert. It requires deposing the notary. That takes time. We have 2 weeks." I said, "Exactly." Sarah said, "If they close before we get a court order, the house is gone." The buyer is an innocent third party. You might get money damages later, but you will never get the house back. I cannot lose the house. I said, "Then you need to be a physical problem." Sarah said, "Letters are easy to ignore. Phone calls are easy to block. You need to go to the source, the escrow office." I said, "Go there." Sarah said, "Show them your face. Show them your ID. Make them look at you and realize that the person on the paper is not the person standing in front of them. It is risky. Greg might call the police on you for harassment. Let him. I said. I hung up. I looked at the forged power of attorney one last time. I looked at the signature that was almost mine, but not quite. They had stolen my name. They had stolen my history. I grabbed my purse. I grabbed my passport, my driver's license, and my birth certificate. I was going to the escrow office, and I wasn't leaving until they looked me in the eye and acknowledged that I existed. The lobby of the escrow company, First Coastal Title, was a fortress of glass and brushed steel, designed to make people feel that their money was safe, sterile, and serious. I walked in clutching a manila folder that contained my birth certificate, my driver's license, and the terrifyingly ambiguous printout of the deed. My hands were sweating, leaving damp marks on the paper. I approached the receptionist, a young woman with a headset who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. I need to speak to the escrow officer handling the sale of 422 Dune Road. I said. My voice was steady, practiced in the car for the last hour. She blinked at me. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, but I am the owner of the property, and I believe a fraudulent transaction is taking place. The word fraudulent is a magic word in a title company. It is like shouting fire in a crowded theater, except instead of panicking, everyone goes deadly silent. The receptionist stopped chewing her gum. She typed something into her computer, her eyes darting up to my face. 1 moment, she said. She made a call. 2 minutes later, a woman in a sharp navy blazer walked out. She introduced herself as Ms. Vance. She did not smile. She did not offer a hand. She gestured for me to follow her into a small conference room with frosted glass walls. Sit down, Ms. Parker, she said. She closed the door. The air in the room was recycled and cold. I sat. I placed my ID on the table. My stepfather, Gregory Hines, is attempting to sell my father's house. I said, I have not authorized this sale. I have not signed any documents. The power of attorney he is using is a forgery. Ms. Vance looked at the ID. She looked at me. Then she folded her hands on the table. Her demeanor shifted instantly. The customer service veneer, the politeness used for clients bringing in commission checks, vanished. In its place was the rigid, stone-faced wall of compliance. Ms. Parker, she said, her voice dry. I cannot discuss the details of an open escrow with a non-party. I am not a non-party, I said, leaning forward. I am the owner. Our file lists the seller as the Parker Shoreline Trust, represented by the trustee and authorized agent. She said, my heart hammered against my ribs. I am the beneficiary of that trust, I said, and likely the trustee, my father, Robert Parker, established it. Ms. Vance's eyes narrowed slightly. She tapped a finger on the polished table. Do you have the trust document? She asked. I hesitated. This was the weak link in my chainmail. No, I said. My stepfather has hidden it. Ms. Vance sat back. Ms. Parker, without a trust instrument proving your authority, I cannot stop a transaction based on verbal allegations. However, she paused. She looked at the door, then back at me. However, she continued slowly, the file contains a trust certification and a schedule, referencing the assets. We are required to verify the identity of the current trustee. If you are claiming the trustee on file is invalid, you need to provide the original trust. She was giving me a hint, a crumb. Schedule A, trust certification. These were specific documents. Greg had provided something to them. He hadn't just walked in and said, trust me. He had forged a certification. If I bring you the trust, I asked, will you stop the sale? If you bring me a trust document that contradicts the authority currently on file, she said, choosing her words with lawyerly precision. We would be obligated to pause closing to conduct a title review. We do not insure bad title. She stood up. I suggest you find that document. Ms. Parker, closing is scheduled for the 21st. That was 10 days away. I walked out of the office with my knees shaking. But my mind was racing. Schedule A, that was the list of assets attached to a trust. If Greg had a Schedule A, He had the trust, or part of it. I needed to find where the trust came from. My next stop was the county courthouse, specifically the probate division. If my father had a will, or if there had been a dispute, it would be there. I requested my father's file. The clerk handed me a thin folder, too thin. I opened it. Summary administration. It was a petition to settle a small estate. It listed a few bank accounts, an old car, and some personal effects. It did not list the beach house. I stared at the paper. If the beach house had been in his name personally, it would have had to go through full probate. The fact that it wasn't listed meant it was already in the trust when he died. The trust operated outside of probate. That was the point of it. Privacy and speed. But here was the catch. The petitioner on the summary administration was my mother. She had signed a document swearing that these were his only assets subject to administration. She knew the house was in trust. She had known for 3 years. I felt a fresh wave of betrayal wash over me. She hadn't just been passive. She had been an active participant in the lie. I needed to find someone who knew my father's mind, someone who wasn't compromised by Greg. I searched my phone for a number I hadn't called in years. Mr. Henderson. He was my father's financial planner, a man who wore bow ties and treated portfolio management like a sacred duty. He had retired the year after Dad died. I found a listing for him in a neighboring town and called. Hello? An older voice, shaky but clear. Mr. Henderson? This is Natalie Parker, Robert Parker's daughter. There was a pause, and then the warmth flooded through the line. Natalie, he said. My goodness, it has been a long time. I was so sorry to hear about your father. He was a good man. Mr. Henderson, I said, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember if my dad set up a trust, specifically for the beach house? A trust? He repeated. Oh, yes, absolutely. He was obsessed with it. He was? Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Your father was concerned. Natalie. He came to me about 6 months before he passed. He said he wanted to make sure the beach house was locked away in writing. He used those exact words, locked away. Did he say why? I asked. Though I suspected I knew. He was worried about your mother. Mr. Henderson said gently. He loved her. You understand. But he felt she was malleable. He was terrified that if she remarried, a new husband might pressure her to sell it. He wanted to protect you from future spouses and pressure. He wanted that house to be your anchor. Tears pricked my eyes. He had seen this coming. He had looked at Greg, or men like Greg, and he had built a fortress to keep me safe. Do you have a copy of the trust? I asked. No. Mr. Henderson sighed. He used an attorney for that, a specialist. I don't recall the name. But I remember your dad saying he didn't want the documents kept at the main house. He didn't want them where they could be found easily. Where did he keep them? He mentioned a box. Mr. Henderson said, a metal document box. He said he was going to keep it at the beach house. He said, it belongs with the land. I thanked him and hung up. A metal box at the beach house. I checked the time. It was late afternoon. Greg and my mother would be at work or at their own house. The beach house should be empty. I drove fast. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across the highway. When I pulled up to Dune Road, the for sale sign looked like a tombstone in the fading light. I walked up the driveway. I knew I couldn't get in the front door. The new digital lockbox stopped that. But I knew this house. I knew that the window in the laundry room had a latch that didn't quite catch if you jiggled it from the bottom. I circled back. I found the window. I pushed up. It resisted for a moment, then slid open with a screech of old aluminum. I climbed over the dryer and dropped onto the linoleum floor. The house smelled different now, smelled of cleaning chemicals and that sterile staging furniture. But underneath, the scent of cedar remained. It belongs with the land. Where would he hide a box? I checked the closets. I checked the attic hatch. Nothing. Then I remembered. When I was 10, we had a termite scare. Dad had to pull up a section of the floorboards in the guest bedroom closet to let the inspector check the subfloor. He had never nailed it back down properly. He had just fitted the tongue and groove back together so it looked solid. I ran to the guest room. It was currently staged as a home office with a fake desk and a generic abstract painting. I went to the closet. I pushed aside the staged yoga mats and got down on my knees. I pulled back the edge of the cheap area rug they had put down. My heart sank. The floorboards were there, but along the seams, there was a fresh, shiny line of clear sealant. I touched it. It was dry, but it wasn't old. It was silicone. Someone had been here. Someone had pried this up, taken whatever was underneath, and sealed it back shut to hide the evidence. I sat back on my heels, feeling the cold seep into my legs. Greg, he had found it. That was how he got the Schedule A. That was how he got the details to forge the rest. He had the original trust, and he was burying it. Well, look who it is. I spun around. Greg was standing in the doorway of the bedroom. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was wearing jeans and a windbreaker. He looked casual, relaxed, which made the situation infinitely more terrifying. "How did you get in?" I asked. Standing up, "I own the place." "Natalie," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Or I represent the owner. The question is, what are you doing breaking and entering?" "I am looking for the trust." I said, "The one you stole from under these floorboards." Greg looked at the floor, then back at me. He smiled a tight, thin smile. "You have a vivid imagination. I know about the summary administration," I said, stepping toward him. "I know you bypassed probate because the house was already in trust. I know you are forging my signature." Greg didn't flinch. He didn't yell like he had at the dinner. He just sighed, like a parent dealing with a toddler who refused to nap. "Natalie, stop digging," he said softly. "You are going to hurt yourself. I am going to stop this sale." I said. Greg laughed. It was a dry sound. "No, you are not. The buyers are cash heavy. The title company is satisfied. The train has left the station. But—" he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I am a reasonable man. I know this is emotional for you. I know you feel left out." He unfolded the paper. It was a check. I squinted at it. $10,000. "What is this?" I asked. "A consulting fee," he said, "for your help in organizing the property. Call it a gift. Call it an advance on your inheritance. It is 10 grand. Natalie, you can pay off your credit card. You can take a trip. Just take it. Walk away, and let us finish this." I looked at the check. It was drawn on the joint account he shared with my mother. "You are offering me $10,000 for a house worth $2 million? I asked. "I am offering you a way out," he said. His eyes went cold. "If you keep pushing, Natalie, you get nothing. You get disowned. You get sued for slander of title. You get nothing but legal bills and misery. Take the check. Go home." I looked at his hand. I wanted to slap it away. But I knew that would satisfy him. He wanted me to be emotional. I didn't take the check. "I will see you in court, Greg," I said. He crumbled the check in his fist. "You are making a mistake," he said. "A very expensive mistake." I pushed past him. He didn't stop me. He just watched me go. His silence heavier than any threat. I drove away shaking. He was so confident. He had the original documents. He had the money. He had the momentum. I needed to find a crack in the armor. The next day, the crack appeared. But it didn't come from Greg. It came from Bella. I ran into her at the local coffee shop. It was accidental. Small towns are like that. She was ordering a skinny vanilla latte, looking stressed, tapping furiously on her phone. She saw me and rolled her eyes. But she didn't walk away. She looked like she wanted to fight. "I hope you are satisfied," she said as she waited for her drink. "Mom is a wreck. She hasn't slept in 2 days because of your legal threats. I am not the one selling her husband's legacy." I said. Bella scoffed. "It is just a house, Natalie, and we need the money now. Do you know the florist threatened to cancel? Dad had to advance the deposit last week just to keep the date." I paused. "Dad advanced the deposit?" I asked. "With what money?" Bella looked confused for a second, then defensive. "He has money," she said. "He used his business line of credit. He said as soon as the house closes, he pays it back. That is why the closing date is so important. If we miss the deadline, he loses the non-refundable deposits. I stared at her. Non-refundable deposits for a wedding don't usually require a business line of credit, and Greg's business, a consulting firm that seemed to consist mostly of him playing golf, hadn't turned a profit in years. There was something else. I went back to my apartment and looked at the calendar. The wedding was in 6 weeks. The closing was in 10 days. If the money was just for the wedding, why the frantic rush to close now? Why not wait a month? Why was Greg acting like a man with a gun to his head? I opened my laptop. I had set up a Google alert for my own name and for the beach house address after the first insurance email. There was a new hit. It wasn't a public record. It was a post on a consumer complaint forum about Red River Lending, predatory lender. They foreclose in 30 days. Watch out for the balloon payments. I checked my email. There was a message in my spam folder. It had arrived 2 days ago, but I had missed it. Subject: Final Notice of Default. Account: 88392. My stomach dropped. I opened it. Dear Ms. Parker, this is a final notification regarding the collateralized loan on 422 Dune Road. The balloon payment of $150,000 is due on the 22nd. Failure to satisfy this obligation will result in immediate action against the property. You are listed as the responsible party. I sat back. The room spinning. It wasn't for the wedding. Greg had taken out a hard money loan against the house, using the forged power of attorney, months ago. He had probably used it to cover his own gambling debts or failed business ventures. Now the loan was coming due. He needed to sell the house not to pay for Bella's flowers, but to pay off the loan shark before they foreclosed and exposed his fraud. The wedding was just the cover story. The family sacrifice was a lie. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I was Peter. I called Sarah Jenkins immediately. He has a balloon payment due on the 22nd. I said, that is why he is rushing the closing. If he doesn't sell, the lender takes the house. We need a temporary restraining order. Sarah said, we need to freeze the asset. File it. I said, she did. But the court system is a slow beast, even in an emergency. 2 days later, Sarah called me. Her voice was flat. Bad news. Natalie, the court docket is backed up. The earliest hearing date we could get for the TRO is the 24th. The 24th. The closing was the 21st. The loan was due the 22nd. By the time we got before a judge, the house would be sold. The money would be wired to the lender, and the rest would disappear into Greg's pockets. We are too late, Sarah said. Unless you can find that trust document. Unless you can prove to the escrow officer before the 21st that you are the trustee. I hung up. I felt a scream trapped in my throat. I had the truth, but I didn't have the paper. Greg had the paper, and he had likely burned it or shredded it. I paced my apartment. I felt trapped. I thought about my father. I thought about how he had tried to protect me. Locked away. It belongs with the land. He had put the box under the floorboard, but Greg found it. Was there anywhere else? I closed my eyes, trying to summon a memory. My father was a creature of habit. He hid things. He liked secret compartments. I remembered the workshop behind the main house, the one Greg had turned into a storage shed for his golf cart. I remembered being 12 years old. Dad was framing a photo. It was a picture of us on the fishing boat. He was showing me how to use the matting tape. Always leave a backup. Nat, he had said. He had taped something behind the photo. Not inside the frame, but between the cardboard backing and the photo itself. If they ever try to sell the shore house, take this to a closing agent. The memory hit me so hard I gasped. Where was that photo? I hadn't seen it in the beach house. Greg had cleared everything out. I cleaned out your childhood boxes, he had said, but I had taken some things. When Dad died, I had taken a few boxes of his personal items to my apartment storage unit because my mother said she couldn't bear to look at them. I grabbed my keys and ran down to the basement storage of my building. The metal cage was stuffed with plastic bins. I tore through them. Old sweaters, college textbooks, kitchen gadgets, and then a box marked Dad's office. I ripped the tape off, books, a paperweight, and at the bottom, wrapped in bubble wrap, a wooden frame. I pulled it out. It was the picture. Me, 12 years old, holding a striped bass. Dad grinning behind me, wearing his lucky yellow hat. I turned it over. The backing was brown paper, sealed with age. I didn't hesitate. I smashed the glass against the concrete floor. I pulled the shards away. I ripped the photo out of the frame. I tore the cardboard backing, and there it was, a thick, white envelope, taped to the back of the cardboard with heavy-duty duct tape. On the front, in my father's blocky, engineer handwriting, for Natalie, open only in emergency. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold it. I ripped the envelope open. Inside wasn't just a letter, it was a document. Blue-backed and stapled. Declaration of Trust, the Parker Shoreline Trust. And clipped to the front was a handwritten note on yellow legal paper. Nat, if you are reading this, I am gone, and someone is trying to take the house. I knew your mother might let herself be swayed. She has a good heart, but she trusts the wrong people. This document is the original duplicate. The other one is under the floor at the beach house. If that one is gone, this is your shield. You are the trustee. You have been since the moment I died. No one can sell this house but you. Take this to the closing agent. Do not let them take your history. Love, Dad. I sank to the floor of the storage unit, clutching the paper to my chest. I sobbed, not from grief, but from relief. He had known. He had known Greg would find the box. He had known they would try to erase him. So he had planted a backup in the one place he knew I would keep safe. A memory of us. I looked at the date on the trust. It was notarized. It was real. I looked at the closing date on the calendar in my mind. The 21st. Today was the 19th. I wiped my face. I stood up. I had the weapon. Now I just had to deliver the blow. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah Jenkins. I found it. Then I texted Greg. Enjoy your closing. I'll be there. I walked out of the storage unit into the night. The air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I felt the heat of the fire I was about to light. I sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit, the harsh fluorescent light buzzing overhead. I unfolded the blue-backed document I had torn from the frame. My heart, which had been hammering a rhythm of victory, slowed to a confused thud. It wasn't the full trust. It was a trust certification. A 5-page abstract that summarized the powers of the trust, but didn't contain the specific asset schedules or the detailed articles of administration. It was proof that the trust existed, but without the full instrument, a title company might still hesitate. I picked up the handwritten letter attached to it. My father's handwriting was jagged, written in the shaky script of his final weeks. Nat, I created the Parker Shoreline Trust to hold the beach house. I am naming you the primary beneficiary and the successor trustee effective immediately upon my death. I did not tell your mother the specifics. I love her, but she is soft, and she lets people make decisions for her. If she remarries, her future spouse may try to treat the house like marital property. They may try to convince her to sell it to fund their own mistakes. Do not let them. This certification is your proof. If you need the full file, contact Miller and Associates. They drafted it. I wiped my eyes. He had seen Greg coming before Greg had even arrived. I looked at the bottom of the certification. Miller and Associates. I checked the date. It was 5 years ago. The next morning, I called the firm. A receptionist answered. Her voice clipped and professional. Miller and Associates. I asked to speak to Arthur Miller. The attorney listed on the certification, Mr. Miller retired 3 years ago. She said, his files have been archived. Who is calling? Natalie Parker. I said, I am the successor trustee of the Parker Shoreline Trust. I need a copy of the full trust instrument immediately. There was a pause. We cannot release estate documents without verification. She said, the files are sealed to protect the privacy of the grantors. Are you the client of record? My father was, I said, Robert Parker. He has passed away. I will need to verify your status before we can unseal the archive, she said. Mr. Miller left strict protocols for trustee verification on his sensitive files. Did your father leave you a passphrase? A passphrase, I asked. Yes, a security question or code to confirm identity. I felt a surge of panic. I looked at the letter again. I scanned the text. There were no codes, no random strings of numbers. Think, Natalie. I read the letter again. Remember the day we caught the striper off the jetty? You were so mad you lost your hat. It wasn't just a memory, it was an odd detail. I hadn't lost my hat that day. I had lost my shoe. My favorite red sneaker had fallen into the water. Dad had teased me about it for years, calling me Cinderella of the Sound. Wait. I looked at the very bottom of the letter. Below the signature, there was a postscript. P.S. Tell Miller the Cinderella story. That was it. The passphrase is Cinderella. I said into the phone. There was a silence. Then I heard the clicking of keys. One moment. Ms. Parker, the receptionist said. Her tone changed completely. I see the notation here. Cinderella, I will have the file pulled from the digital archive. We can email it to you within the hour. Thank you. I breathed. I hung up and slumped back in my chair. I was currently working a temporary data entry job at a logistics firm downtown. A soul-crushing gig I had taken 2 weeks ago just to keep the lights on and pay Sarah Jenkins. I was sitting in a low-walled cubicle, surrounded by people who didn't know that my entire life was currently a crime scene. I needed that email. But before the email arrived, Greg did. I heard his voice before I saw him. It was booming, jovial, the voice of a man who owned the room. I am just looking for my daughter, he announced to the floor manager. Natalie! There she is. I froze. He was walking down the aisle between the cubicles, carrying a coffee carrier with 2 cups. He was wearing his good dad costume, a soft sweater and a concerned smile. Heads popped up from monitors. My colleagues, who knew nothing about me other than that I typed fast and kept to myself, watched with interest. Greg, I said, standing up. What are you doing here? I just wanted to bring you a coffee, he said, setting it on my desk. He lowered his voice, but not enough. It was a stage whisper, designed to be overheard. Your mom is so worried. Nat, you are not answering her calls. We just want to make sure you are okay. You know, after everything that has happened. He tapped the side of his head significantly. I stared at him. He was gaslighting me in front of an audience. He was painting a picture of a fragile, unstable daughter, so that if I caused a scene, everyone would think I was the problem. I am fine. Greg, I said, keeping my voice level, I am working. Please leave, he sighed, looking around at my coworkers with a sad, apologetic smile. She is just under a lot of stress. He told the woman in the next cubicle. Job loss, the breakup. It has been a hard year. We are just trying to help her let go of the past. Get out, I said. Greg held up his hands in surrender. Okay. I am going. Just call your mother. Natalie, stop the legal nonsense. It is costing money you do not have. He turned and walked away, leaving the coffee steaming on my desk. My face burned. The woman in the next cubicle gave me a pitying look. Don't worry, honey, she said. Families are tough. I didn't answer. I took the coffee and dropped it into the trash can. It landed with a heavy thud. My phone buzzed. It wasn't the law firm. It was my mother. I walked out to the stairwell to answer. Mom, I said. Natalie, please, she sobbed. The sound of her crying usually broke me, but today it just felt like noise. You have to stop this. Greg is furious. He says you are going to get us sued. Mom, I said, I found the trust. The sobbing stopped abruptly. What? I found Dad's letter, and I'm getting the full document from his attorney today. I know I am the trustee. Mom, I have been the trustee for 3 years. There was a long silence. Then, her voice came through, small and broken. I didn't know. She whispered, You signed the deed over to the trust. Mom, you had to know. I didn't read it, she cried. Greg told me it was just paperwork to refinance the house. He said we needed to pull some equity out to fix the roof and pay some bills. He said if I didn't sign it, the bank would foreclose. I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell. He told you it was a refinance? I asked. Not a sale? At first, she said. Then later. He said the refinance fell through and we had to sell. I felt trapped. Natalie, I had already signed the power of attorney because he said he needed to handle the bank for me. I didn't understand what I was doing. You signed a power of attorney for yourself? I asked. Yes, but he forged one for me. I said, I didn't know that. She said, but Natalie, please, if you expose this, he could go to jail. We could lose everything. Can't we just let the sale go through? He promised he would give you a share. He offered me $10,000. Mom, I said, the house is worth $2 million. Silence. I am not doing this to hurt you, I said, but I am not going to let him steal my father's life. I hung up. My phone pinged. An email from Miller and Associates. Subject: Parker Shoreline Trust, full instrument. I opened the attachment. I scrolled past the preamble, past the definitions. Article 4. Successor trustee. In the event of the death or incapacity of the grantor, the successor trustee shall be Natalie Parker. Article 5. Powers of trustee. The trustee shall have the sole and exclusive authority to sell, lease, or encumber the assets of the trust. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle in my chest. I was the trustee. I had been the legal owner of the beach house since the moment my father took his last breath. Every lease Greg had signed, every rent check he had cashed, every document he had executed was invalid. I forwarded the document to Sarah Jenkins. Serve them. I wrote. Sarah moved fast. Within 2 hours, she had sent a formal demand to the escrow company, attaching the trust certification and the relevant pages of the instrument. She demanded an immediate halt to the closing and a curative review of the file. The reaction was instant. Ms. Vance, the escrow officer, called Sarah, who looped me in. We have a title defect, Ms. Vance said, her voice crisp. We have conflicting claims of authority. The seller on the contract is Gregory Hines, as attorney in fact. The trust document you provided lists Natalie Parker as trustee. We cannot close. Good, I said. However, Ms. Vance continued, Mr. Hines is insisting that the trust was amended or revoked. He is claiming your document is outdated. We need to clear this up. I am scheduling a curative meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. All parties must be present with identification. If we cannot resolve the authority issue, I will resign as escrow agent and return all deposits. I will be there. I said. I spent the night preparing. I felt like a soldier cleaning her rifle before battle. I printed out the trust. I printed out the forged power of attorney. I printed out the email from the insurance company. Then I decided to look at the money one last time. I had the login for the joint account my mother used for the rental income. She had given it to me years ago so I could help her set up autopay for the utilities. And she had never changed the password. I logged in. The balance was 0. I scrolled through the transaction history. 2 days ago. Transfer to external account. $4,000. That was the last of the rent money. Money that was supposed to be saved for the property taxes. I clicked on the Tax Documents tab. There was a notification. Delinquent property tax notice. The taxes hadn't been paid in a year. I sat back, putting the pieces together. Greg hadn't just taken a loan against the house. He had stopped paying the taxes. He had drained the operating account. He was bleeding the property dry. The private lender's threat made sense now. The loan he took out, the business line of credit, was likely a bridge loan. High interest, short term. He had probably used the house as collateral, forging my signature on the mortgage deed. Now the term was up. If he didn't pay the balloon payment, the lender would foreclose. But here was the kicker. If the lender foreclosed, they would do a title search. They would find the trust. They would realize the mortgage was forged, and Greg would be exposed for bank fraud. He needed to sell the house to a third party, to pay off the lender quietly before anyone looked too closely at the paperwork. The sale was the cover-up. I realized then that I couldn't trust anyone, not my mother, who was too scared to speak, not Bella, who was too greedy to care, and certainly not Greg. I downloaded a voice recording app on my phone. The state I lived in was a one-party consent state for wiretapping, meaning as long as I was part of the conversation, I could record it without telling the other person. I would record everything. I slept fitfully, dreaming of drowning in a sea of paper. I woke up at 6. I dressed in a navy suit. Armor. I pulled my hair back. I drank black coffee. I drove to the title company. The conference room was the same one as before, but now it felt like a courtroom. Ms. Vance sat at the head of the table. Sarah Jenkins sat next to me. Greg and his lawyer, a sweating, nervous man named Mr. Doyle, sat on the other side. My mother was there, too, sitting next to Greg. Looking at her hands, Greg looked confident. He had a thick folder in front of him. He nodded at me as if we were just there to sign a birthday card. "Good morning." "Natalie," he said. I didn't answer. I placed my phone on the table. Screen down, the red recording light pulsing silently against the wood. "Let's begin." "Ms. Vance said." She opened the file. "We have a closing scheduled for tomorrow. However, we have a dispute regarding the signatory authority for the seller." She looked at Greg. "Mr. Hines, you have submitted a power of attorney granting you authority to act for Natalie Parker. Ms. Parker has submitted a trust instrument showing she is the sole trustee. These two authorities are in conflict." Greg smiled. He opened his folder. "It is a simple misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "The trust Natalie found is an old draft. It was never funded. Her father abandoned that strategy. The property was treated as a family asset. The power of attorney is the controlling document because Natalie agreed to let me handle the sale to avoid the hassle. She is just getting cold feet now because she wants a bigger cut." He slid a document across the table. "Here is an affidavit from her mother, confirming that the trust was dissolved." I looked at my mother. She flinched. Ms. Vance picked up the affidavit. She read it. Then she looked at the trust document Sarah had provided. "Mr. Hines," she said, "a trust cannot be dissolved by an affidavit from a non-trustee. It must be revoked in writing by the grantor, or by the trustee if the power is granted." She looked him dead in the eye. "Furthermore," she said, "the title search shows the property is vested in the Parker Shoreline Trust. It is not in Natalie Parker's individual name. Therefore, a power of attorney for Natalie Parker, as an individual, is useless for selling this property. You cannot use a personal POA to sell a trust asset unless the POA specifically grants trustee powers, which this one does not." Greg's smile faltered. He hadn't done his homework. He assumed that because he had forged my name, he owned me. He forgot that the house didn't belong to me. It belonged to the trust. "So, Ms. Vance continued, her voice dropping an octave. "The only question I have is this. Why does your authority conflict with this trust certification? And why are you attempting to sell a trust asset using a personal power of attorney?" The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a jet engine. Greg shifted in his seat. "The trust is a technicality," he said, his voice harder now. "I have been managing this property for 3 years. I have the keys. I have the leases. I have the right to sell." Ms. Vance closed the file. "Possession is not title. Mr. Hines, and right now, the title says you are a stranger to this property." She turned to me. "Mrs. Parker, are you prepared to sign the closing documents as trustee?" I looked at Greg. I saw the panic finally flare behind his eyes. He knew. He knew that if I didn't sign, the sale died. And if the sale died, the lender came calling. "No," I said, "I am not selling." Greg slammed his hand on the table. "You have to sell," he shouted. "The deposit is non-refundable." "That is your problem, Greg," I said. "Not the trust's." Ms. Vance stood up. "Then we have no transaction," she said. "I am canceling the escrow. Greg stood up, his face purple. "You cannot do that." He screamed at the escrow officer, "We have a contract. You have a contract with a fraudulent seller." Sarah Jenkins interjected calmly. Greg looked like he was going to lunge across the table. My mother grabbed his arm. "Greg, stop," she whispered. He shook her off. He pointed a finger at me. "You think you are smart?" he hissed. "You think you won? You just destroyed your family." I picked up my phone. I stopped the recording. I didn't destroy anything. I said, "I just saved it." I walked out of the conference room. I felt lightheaded. I had won the battle. But as I walked to the elevator, I checked my phone. I had a new email notification. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from the private lender. Urgent. Pre-foreclosure notice. I stopped. The sale was stopped, but the debt remained, and the debt was secured by a forged mortgage on the house. Greg had stopped the sale, but he had already poisoned the well. The lender didn't care about the trust. They had a lien. And they were coming for my father's house. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The silence in the conference room of First Coastal Title was the heavy, suffocating kind that usually precedes a natural disaster. The air conditioner hummed a low, monotonous note, but it did nothing to cool the heat rising in my face. Ms. Vance, the escrow officer, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table. Her fingers interlaced on top of the file folder that contained the wreckage of my inheritance. She looked from Greg to me, and then back to the documents spread out before her. She was no longer the polite facilitator of a real estate transaction. She was an auditor, a gatekeeper. And right now, she looked like a woman who had found a bomb in her living room. "Mr. Hines," she began, her voice devoid of any warmth, "we have a significant problem with the chain of title." Greg leaned back in his chair, attempting a posture of relaxed confidence that was betrayed by the way his left leg bounced under the table. "It is just a paperwork issue," he said, waving a hand dismissively. As I explained, the trust was an old idea. Natalie and her mother decided to handle things simply. The power of attorney supersedes the old trust draft. Ms. Vance did not blink. "That is not how the law works." "Sir," she said. She opened the folder and pulled out 2 pieces of paper, laying them side by side. "On the left is the preliminary title report," she said, tapping the paper with a manicured nail. "It shows the recorded owner of 422 Dune Road is the Parker Shoreline Trust. On the right is the purchase agreement you signed. You signed as attorney-in-fact for Natalie Parker, an individual." "So?" Greg asked. "Natalie is the beneficiary. It is the same thing. It is not the same thing." "Ms. Vance said, her tone sharpening. "An individual cannot sell an asset they do not hold title to. If the house is in the trust, only the trustee can sell it. Your power of attorney is for Natalie Parker. The person, it does not grant you authority over the Parker Shoreline Trust, unless—" She paused, looking at him over her reading glasses. "Unless you have a document appointing you as trustee." Greg swallowed. I saw the movement in his throat. "My wife is the trustee," he said, gesturing to my mother, "and I am acting on her behalf." "Ms." Vance turned to my mother. My mother was shrinking into her chair, looking at the table as if she wished it would open up and swallow her whole. "Mrs. Hines, Ms." Vance said, "Are you the trustee?" My mother looked at Greg. He gave her a sharp, warning look. I think so," she whispered. "Ms." Vance shook her head. "Thinking so is not enough. Mrs. Hines, the deed references a specific trust instrument. We need to see that instrument to verify who the successor trustee is. And right now, the only person who has produced any evidence of that trust is Ms. Parker." Ms. Vance turned to me. "Ms. Parker has provided a trust certification and a letter from the grantor. Robert Parker." She slid the documents I had brought toward the center of the table. Greg snorted. He reached out and picked up the letter, my father's letter, with a look of disdain. "This?" he said, shaking the paper. "This is ridiculous. Look at this. It is handwritten. It is sentimental garbage. Natalie probably wrote this herself last night on some old stationery she found in the attic. It is a forgery. My blood ran cold. It is not a forgery, I said, my voice shaking with rage. It is my father's handwriting. Greg tossed the letter back onto the table. It is convenient, isn't it? He sneered. A secret letter found just in time to stop a sale that benefits the whole family. Come on, Miss Vance, you are a professional. You are going to hold up a $2 million deal based on a scrap of paper produced by a disgruntled daughter? Sarah Jenkins, my attorney, leaned forward. She hadn't said much yet, but when she spoke, her voice was like a whip crack. Ms. Vance, she said, we can clear this up right now. The trust certification lists the drafting firm as Miller & Associates. I have their representative on the line. Sarah pulled her phone from her pocket and placed it on the table. She tapped the speaker button. Hello? A clear professional voice filled the room. This is Diane from Miller & Associates. Ms. Vance leaned toward the phone. This is the escrow officer at First Coastal Title. We are verifying the existence of the Parker Shoreline Trust. Yes, Diane said. I have the file open in front of me. The trust was established on August 15th, 2015. The grantor was Robert Parker. And who is the named successor trustee? Sarah asked. Diane did not hesitate. The successor trustee is Natalie Parker. The room went dead silent. Greg's face turned a mottled shade of red. That is a mistake, he shouted at the phone. The file must be outdated. He changed it. I am looking at the final executed copy. Diane said calmly, there were no amendments. The trust is irrevocable upon death. Natalie Parker is the sole trustee. Ms. Vance sat back. The investigative tension in the room snapped into a cold, hard resolution. Thank you. Diane, she said. Sarah ended the call. Ms. Vance looked at Greg. Mr. Hines, she said, you have attempted to sell a property you do not own, using a power of attorney that is legally insufficient, and you have misrepresented the ownership structure to this title company. Greg stood up. This is a setup, he yelled. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You set this up. You want to humiliate us? Greg, stop. The voice didn't come from me. It came from my mother. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. Mom, I said softly. I didn't know. She sobbed. I swear, Natalie, I didn't know about the trust. You signed the deed. Mom, I said, he told me it was just for taxes, she cried, her voice rising to a wail. He told me it was just to protect the house so we wouldn't lose it to estate taxes. And then last month, he brought me papers to sign. What papers? Ms. Vance asked sharply. Refinance papers, my mother choked out. He told me we were refinancing the house to get some cash out. He said we needed $40,000 for the wedding. He said we would pay it back over time. He never said we were selling it. The room froze. Greg looked at my mother with a mixture of shock and betrayal. He hadn't expected her to break. He had counted on her passivity, her desire to keep the peace. But the pressure had cracked her open. You told her it was a refinance? I asked, looking at Greg. He didn't answer. He was breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. I signed the papers because I wanted to help Bella. My mother wept. I thought we were keeping the house. I thought we were just borrowing against it. And then I saw the sign in the yard. And Greg told me the refinance fell through and we had to sell or we would lose everything. He said it was too late to stop it. He said if I told you, you would hate me. She buried her face in her hands. I felt a surge of pity mixed with fury. He had gaslit her too. He had manipulated her fear of abandonment, her fear of conflict, to get her signature on documents she didn't understand. Just then, the conference room door flew open. We all turned. Bella stood in the doorway. She was wearing a white tracksuit with bride written in rhinestones across the chest. Her hair was in a messy bun, and her face was flushed. What is taking so long? She demanded. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked straight at Greg. The florist is calling me. Dad, the check bounced. You said the funds would be available today. Bella, not now, Greg hissed. She stomped into the room, bringing a cloud of expensive perfume and entitlement with her. Don't tell me not now, she screamed. The wedding is in 6 weeks. I have vendors threatening to walk. You promised me this was handled. You said the sale was a done deal. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing into slits. This is your fault, isn't it? You are doing this. You are jealous because I'm getting married and you are alone, so you are trying to ruin my life. Bella, shut up, I said. She gasped. Don't you dare talk to me like that. This is my wedding. This is the most important day of my life, and you are holding the money hostage because of some stupid house that nobody even uses. Ms. Vance cleared her throat. It was a loud, authoritative sound. Ms. Hines, she said, if you are referring to the proceeds from the sale of this property, I must inform you that there are no funds available, and there likely will be none. Bella froze. She looked at Greg. What does she mean? She asked, her voice trembling. Dad? What does she mean? Greg didn't look at her. He was staring at the table. We have paid deposits, Bella whispered. We paid the venue. We paid the caterer. We paid the planner. Ms. Vance looked at her file. Mr. Hines, she said, according to the settlement statement, there were no deposit disbursements authorized from escrow. Greg went pale. Where did the money for the deposits come from? Bella? I asked. Bella looked confused. Dad paid them, she said. He said he got an advance. He said he pulled it from the equity. I looked at Greg. You didn't get an advance from the sale. I said, you took a hard money loan, didn't you? You borrowed against the house before you even listed it. Greg said nothing. This wedding budget, I said to Bella, my voice calm but hard. It was built on fraud. He spent money he didn't have, banking on selling my house to pay it back before anyone noticed. No, Bella moaned. No, that is not true. Dad? Before Greg could answer, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't family. A man in a dark gray suit walked in. He was holding a briefcase. He looked expensive. I am representing the buyer, the man said. He didn't introduce himself. He just walked to the table and threw a letter down. We were told there were no title issues, he said. His voice clipped and angry. My client has wired $2 million into escrow. We have movers scheduled for Monday. And now I hear there is a trust dispute? Ms. Vance looked pained. Mr. Sterling, she said, we are currently addressing a defect in the seller's authority. A defect? The lawyer laughed sharply. It sounds like misrepresentation. My client was told the seller was an individual with clear title. If this deal falls through because of fraud, we will be filing suit for specific performance and damages. We will encumber this property so heavily that no one will be able to sell it for a decade. He looked at Greg. And we will be naming the listing agent and the seller personally for acting in bad faith. The air in the room was now toxic. It wasn't just a family squabble anymore. It was a legal disaster. Ms. Vance stood up. She closed the file with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, First Coastal Title is formally resigning as the escrow agent for this transaction. We are freezing all funds currently held. We are referring this file to our underwriter's legal department for review. No closing will take place. She looked at Greg. I suggest you get criminal counsel. Mr. Hines. Greg stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He didn't say a word. He grabbed his folder and stormed out of the room. My mother was sobbing. Bella was screaming at her mother to stop crying. The buyer's attorney was yelling at Ms. Vance. I sat there, feeling a strange, cold wash of relief. It was stopped. The house was safe. Sarah touched my arm. We need to go, she said. I nodded. I gathered my papers. I didn't look at my mother or Bella. I couldn't. We walked out into the bright, blinding sunshine of the parking lot. The relief lasted exactly 30 seconds. As we reached my car, I remembered. The closing was stopped, but the lender wasn't. The 22nd? That was the deadline for the balloon payment. Greg had taken the loan. The The house was the collateral. If the money wasn't paid in 3 days, the lender would foreclose. Natalie. I turned. Greg was standing by his car. A few rows away. He was alone. He beckoned to me. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Do not talk to him," she said. "I have to." I said. I walked over to him, stopping 10 feet away. He looked deflated. The bluster was gone. He looked old. "You won," he said. "Are you happy?" "I am not happy." "Greg." I said, "I am disgusted." He laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "You think this is about the wedding?" he asked. "You think I care about Bella's flowers?" "Then what is it?" I asked. "I owe money." "Natalie," he said, "real money." "To who?" "To people you do not want to know." He said, "I had a business opportunity, a development deal. It was a sure thing. I borrowed the seed money. It collapsed. The money is gone." "And Red River Lending?" I asked. "A bridge loan," he said, "to pay off the first guys while I liquidated the house. I thought I had time. I thought I could sell the beach house, pay off Red River, pay for the wedding, and have enough left over to keep your mother comfortable." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "They are going to kill me. Natalie, not literally, but financially. They will expose me. I used your name on the loan documents because my credit was shot. If this sale doesn't go through, Red River forecloses. And when they foreclose, they will see the forgery. So you framed me." I said, "I was trying to save us." He shouted, "If I go down, your mother goes down. Her name is on the joint accounts. They will take her house. They will take her pension. Do you want that?" He stepped closer. "Let the sale go through," he begged. "We can sign the trust papers today. We can backdate them. We sell the house, pay the debt, and I walk away. I will disappear. I promise. Just save your mother." I looked at him. I saw the fear, but I also saw the manipulation. He was still trying to use my love for my mother as a weapon. He blamed me. "You are forcing my hand." I looked at Sarah, who was watching from my car, phone in hand, ready to dial 911. "I cannot do that." "Greg," I said, "then you are burying her." He spat. He got in his car and drove away, tires screeching. I walked back to Sarah. My legs felt like jelly. He confessed. I said, "He took a loan. He forged my name on the mortgage. If we don't pay it in 3 days, they foreclose." Sarah listened, her face grim. "Okay," she said. "Here's the reality. We cannot stop the foreclosure with a letter. The lender has a recorded lien. Even if it is forged, they have a legal claim until a court says otherwise. So what do? We have to go nuclear." Sarah said, "We have to file a police report immediately. Identity theft, forgery, mortgage fraud." I closed my eyes. "If I do that?" "He goes to prison." "Yes," she said. "And my mother. She will be dragged into it." Sarah admitted. "She signed documents too. She might not be charged if she cooperates. But her financial life will be destroyed. The creditors will come for everything Greg touched." I leaned against the car. "Is there another way?" I asked. "Can we just negotiate with the lender?" "With what leverage?" Sarah asked. "You are not the borrower. You are the victim. The only way to stop the foreclosure is to prove the mortgage is invalid. And the only way to prove it is invalid is to prove a crime was committed." She put a hand on my shoulder. "Natalie, he has already destroyed the family. He did that when he signed your name. He did that when he lied to your mother. You are not the one pulling the trigger. You are just reporting the gunshot." I nodded. It felt like I was swallowing glass. "Let's go," I said. We drove to the police station. It was a brick building that smelled of stale smoke and floor wax. I sat at a metal desk across from a detective who looked too young to be shaving. I laid it all out. The deed, the trust, the forged power of attorney, the insurance email, the threat from the lender. The detective took notes. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he had seen this story 100 times. "This is a lot of money," he said. "This is grand larceny." "I know," I whispered. I signed the statement. My hand trembled so much the signature barely looked like mine. "Step 1, Sarah said as we walked out. Step 2 is the court petition. We went back to her office. She drafted an emergency petition to the probate court. Petition to confirm trustee authority and remove invalid liens. Petition for temporary restraining order against Gregory Hines. We filed it electronically at 4 o'clock. At 5 o'clock. My phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew anything I said could be used against me. But it was my mother. I picked up. Natalie? Her voice was small, broken. Hi, Mom. Greg came home. She said, he is packing a bag. He says you are going to the police. I already went. Mom. She let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. Why? She cried. Why couldn't we just fix this? We could have sold the house. We could have paid it off. Mom, he stole from me. I said, he stole from you. He emptied your bank account. I don't care about the money, she yelled. I care about my life. Everyone will know. The neighbors, the church. Everyone will know my husband is a criminal. He is a criminal. Mom, please, she begged. Please, Natalie, withdraw the report. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can fix it privately. We can take out a second mortgage on my house. We can pay the lender. I realized then what privately meant. It meant I lost my inheritance. It meant she lost her equity. It meant we both set ourselves on fire to keep Greg warm. I cannot do that. I said, I am sorry. Mom, but I cannot save you from him. You have to save yourself. You are selfish, she whispered. You always were. You love that house more than you love people. The line went dead. I sat in Sarah's office, the phone in my hand. The words stung, but they didn't bleed. I knew they weren't true. I didn't love the house more than people. I loved the truth, and for the first time in my life, I was choosing the truth over the comfortable lie. I drove home. My apartment was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I ordered takeout that I knew I wouldn't eat. At 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed again, a text from Bella. I opened it, bracing myself. If you do this, you'll never have a family again. Dad is leaving. Mom is on the floor crying. The wedding is off. I hope the beach house keeps you warm at night because that is all you have left. I read it twice. If you do this, as if I was the one who forged the signature, as if I was the one who spent the money. I typed a reply. I am sorry. Then I deleted it. I typed another. He did this, not me. I deleted that too. There was nothing to say. They had chosen their narrative. I was the villain because I refused to be the victim. I saved the screenshot. I backed it up to the cloud, right next to the forged contract and the trust certification. I put the phone down. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I was alone. My family was gone. My mother hated me. But tomorrow, I would go to court. Tomorrow. I would stand before a judge and reclaim my name. I thought about my father. I thought about the letter in the frame. Do not let them take your history. I hadn't. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. But I didn't cry either. I lay in the dark, listening to the city breathe, waiting for the sun to rise on the wreckage of my life, ready to start picking up the pieces. The courthouse smelled of anxiety and cheap floor cleaner. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4, clutching a binder that contained the autopsy of my family's betrayal. Sarah Jenkins sat beside me, looking calm and predatory in her charcoal suit. "This will be quick," she said, "but it will be ugly." I nodded. I felt a strange numbness, the kind that settles in after a long period of adrenaline. I watched the hallway. Greg arrived 5 minutes before the hearing. He wasn't with Mr. Doyle, the attorney from the title company meeting. He had a new lawyer, a man who looked like he advertised on billboards, slick hair, shiny shoes, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Greg didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead, his jaw set in a hard line. We filed into the courtroom. The judge was a woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She peered over her glasses as the bailiff called the case. In the matter of the Parker Shoreline Trust, Sarah stood up. "Your Honor, we are petitioning for an order confirming Natalie Parker as the sole trustee and removing any clouds on the title created by Mr. Hines, we are also alleging forgery and fraud. Greg's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. These are wild accusations. My client has been managing this property for years with the family's consent. Ms. Parker is confused about the legal structure. The trust she references is ambiguous and was effectively abandoned by practice. The judge raised a hand. Let us look at the documents, she said. She reviewed the deed I had pulled from the records office. She reviewed the trust certification I had found in the frame. She reviewed the power of attorney Greg had used. This deed references the trust clearly. The judge said, It is not ambiguous. The property is a trust asset. She picked up the power of attorney. And this document? She said, The notary is Jennifer Stevens? Yes, Your Honor. Sarah said, We have submitted a sworn affidavit from Ms. Stevens. Sarah handed a paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge read it silently. Her eyebrows went up. Ms. Stevens states she has no record of notarizing this document for Natalie Parker on the date in question. The judge read aloud. She states that her stamp was kept in an unlocked drawer at her former workplace, a car dealership where Mr. Hines was briefly employed as a consultant. The air left the room. Greg's lawyer shifted on his feet. Your Honor, he began. My client. Save it, the judge snapped. She looked at Greg. Mr. Hines, based on the evidence before me, it appears you have no authority to sell, encumber, or manage this property. Your power of attorney is highly suspect, and even if it were valid, it does not grant you trustee powers. She banged her gavel. I am granting the temporary order. Natalie Parker is recognized as the sole acting trustee. Mr. Hines, you are restrained from contacting the escrow company, the lender, the property manager, or entering the premises of 422 Dune Road. You are also ordered to provide a full accounting of all rent proceeds and expenses for the last 3 years within 10 days. Greg stood up, his face red. Your Honor, this is a mistake. I have personal funds tied up in that house. That is a matter for a separate civil suit. The judge said coldly, Step away from the bench. We walked out of the courtroom. Greg stopped near the water fountain. He looked at me with pure venom. You think you are clever, he hissed. You just started a war you cannot finish. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. The victory was swift, but the fallout was slow and painful. The private lender, Red River, backed off publicly once the court order was issued. They sent a letter to Sarah stating they were pausing collection activities pending a review of the collateral, but the underlying threat remained. They had a lien, even if it was based on fraud. Untangling it would take months of litigation. Sarah was optimistic. They violated the Truth in Lending Act. She told me, They named you as a borrower without your consent. We can use that. We can sue them for predatory practices if they try to foreclose. They don't want the scrutiny. But the real blow came when the accounting arrived. 10 days later, a thick envelope landed on Sarah's desk. It was a chaotic mess of bank statements and receipts that Greg had scraped together. We sat in her office and went through it line by line. Rent income, $3,000 a month. Expenses, property tax, unpaid, insurance, repairs, and then the withdrawals. Transfer to Bella Hines, $2,000. Memo, dress deposit, transfer to the Grand View, $5,000. Memo, venue hold, transfer to Expedia, $3,000. Memo, family travel. I stared at the lines. The dates went back 6 months. He hadn't just used the loan for the wedding. He had been using the rent, my inheritance, the money that was supposed to maintain the house, to pay for Bella's dream life. Every time my mother had told me they were barely breaking even, she was lying. The house was profitable. They were just siphoning the profit to fund themselves. I felt a sick, heavy weight in my stomach. It wasn't just Greg. My mother had to know. She saw the wedding planning. She knew they didn't have that kind of money. She had watched him spend my father's legacy on Tool and champagne and said nothing. I needed to see her. I drove to the house on Maple Avenue. Greg's car wasn't there. I let myself in. My mother was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of tea. She looked smaller, older. Natalie, she said, not looking up. I put the accounting statement on the table. I saw the numbers. Mom, I said, you used the rent money for the wedding. She didn't deny it. She just sighed. A long, trembling breath. We were going to pay it back. She whispered, once the house sold. Once you sold my house, I corrected. You let him treat my father's legacy like a credit card. She looked up at me then, her eyes red-rimmed. I was scared. Natalie, she cried, he is charming, but he is scary when he is cornered. He told me we had no money. He told me his business was in trouble. He said if we didn't use the house money, we would lose everything. I was terrified of being poor. I was terrified of being alone. So you chose him. I said, you chose his lies over me. I chose peace, she insisted. I just wanted everyone to be happy. I thought if we got through the wedding, everything would go back to normal. Normal? I asked. Mom. Normal was you and Dad. Normal was honesty. This is a crime scene. She started to cry again. I am sorry. She sobbed. I am so sorry. The apology hung in the air. Useless and wet. It didn't fix the forgery. It didn't pay the taxes. It didn't bring back the trust I had lost. I stood up. I am changing the locks on the beach house today. I said, do not come there. Do not call the property manager. It is over. I walked out. I left her crying in the kitchen, a woman who had traded her daughter's security for a man who viewed her as an ATM. The wedding happened 3 weeks later. It wasn't at the Grand View. It was in the backyard of Aunt Linda's house. The guest list was slashed. The expensive flowers were replaced by supermarket bouquets. I wasn't invited. I heard about it from a cousin who texted me updates. Bella is crying in the bathroom. People are whispering. Greg is drunk. He is telling everyone you stole his retirement. Everyone is blaming you. Nat, they say you are vindictive. Let them talk. I sat in my apartment, drinking wine, staring at the trust deed on my wall. I was the villain in their story, but in my story, I was the hero who had survived. The next day, I drove to the beach house. I met a locksmith there. We drilled out the old locks, the ones Greg had installed, and put in heavy-duty deadbolts. I fired the property manager, Coastal Keepers, over the phone. You enabled fraud. I told Brenda, expect a letter from my attorney regarding your negligence. She sputtered, but I hung up. I walked through the house. It was empty now. The staging furniture had been repossessed by the staging company when Greg stopped paying the bill. The house felt tired. The walls were scuffed. The carpet was stained. I walked into the guest bedroom, the home office. I knelt down by the closet. I pried up the floorboard Greg had resealed. The space underneath was empty, just dust and darkness. But then I saw something, tucked way back in the corner. Wedged between the joist and the subfloor was a small piece of paper. Greg had missed it, or maybe it had fallen out of the box when he yanked it. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a note, written on a napkin, my dad's handwriting. For my girls, may this house always be filled with sand and laughter. It wasn't a legal document. It was just a wish that had been corrupted by greed. I sat on the floor and cried. I cried for the dad I missed, for the mom I had lost, and for the family that was never coming back. The sun went down, casting long shadows across the empty room. I heard a car in the driveway. I froze. I walked to the window. It was Greg's sedan. I checked the new deadbolt. It was locked. I watched as he walked up to the porch. He tried the key. It didn't turn. He pounded on the door. Natalie. I know you're in there. Open up. I didn't move. Natalie, we need to talk. I walked to the door. I didn't open it. I spoke through the wood. Go away. Greg, the police are on speed dial. He laughed. It sounded muffled and crazy. I just want to make a deal, he shouted. Listen to me. I can make the lender go away. I have a buyer for the debt, but I need you to sign a release. What kind of release? I asked. A release of liability, he said. You agree not to sue me, and I get the lender to drop the lien. I have a friend who buys bad debt. He will take pennies on the dollar, but I need you to drop the police report. I leaned my forehead against the door. He was still trying to hustle. He was still looking for an angle. There is no deal. Greg, I said. Natalie, don't be stupid, he yelled. If you don't do this, I will make it ugly. I will tell the lender you were complicit. I will tell them you knew about the loan and spent the money. I will drag you through court for 5 years. You can't drag me anywhere, I said. Open the door, he screamed. He kicked the wood. The door shook, but the new bolt held. I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. I have an intruder at 42 Dune Road. I said clearly, loud enough for him to hear, he is violating a restraining order. I heard him swear. Then I heard footsteps retreating. I watched through the window as he got back in his car. He looked back at the house once, a look of pure, unadulterated hate, and then drove away. 2 days later, the final shoe dropped. Sarah called me. Her voice sounded different, heavy. Natalie, sit down. I am sitting. I said, we got a call from the title underwriter. She said, the one investigating the fraud. Yeah? It is bigger than we thought. She said, when they flagged Greg for your transaction, they ran a cross-reference on his name and his notary, Jennifer Stevens, and he has done this before. Sarah said, there are 3 other properties, investment condos in the city. He used the same MO, forged POAs, fake notaries, hard money loans. He has been running a Ponzi scheme of real estate fraud for 5 years. I gasped. Your case was just the one that tipped the domino. Sarah said, the FBI is involved now. It is federal wire fraud. I sat in silence. What does that mean for me? I asked. It means you are going to be a witness. Sarah said, and it means Greg is going away for a long time. And my mother? Sarah paused. If she didn't sign the other documents, she might be okay. But she is going to lose everything else. The assets he bought with stolen money will be seized. Her house. If he put equity into it, they might take it. I hung up. I looked around the beach house. It was mine. I had saved it. But the cost was total devastation. I walked out onto the deck. The ocean was gray and choppy. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I had won. I had my name back. I had my father's house. I took a deep breath of the salt air. It tasted like freedom. It tasted like the truth. And for the first time in a year, I wasn't afraid. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, justice, and the fight for a father's legacy. I hope Natalie's journey resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you Team Natalie, or do you think she should have settled? Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Share your thoughts in English in the comments section. I read every single one.